Mosquito's Swinging Bridge. Mosquito Road winds along ridgetop and ravine and eventually crosses a lava-strewn flat. Here, in the midst of pine needle-covered hillsides of red clay and granite, some ancient, unrecorded volcanic action has created an unlikely landscape of unearthly geological formations and conglomerated lava. In the middle of this desolate and unlikely location, for some reason known only to them, a handful of Chinese immigrants have established a unique and isolated community. Here these peculiar standoffish Argonauts prepare their ceremonial teas and enjoy the euphoric contents of their noxious clay pipes, beyond the scrutiny of a disapproving society and with little fear of interruption. Finding the occupants entirely sociable, we struck up a conversation and visited for about an hour. And then, our lightly steeped libations consumed, and the need for cordiality satisfied, we climbed back in the wagon, and with Hames bells jingling, continued on our way. Reaching the summit of a pine-covered ridge, we rested the mules briefly, and then began our cautious descent into the rugged canyon of the American River's renowned South Fork. The already treacherous thoroughfare soon lost all semblance of a road and gradually took on the unmistakable characteristics of a dry creek bed. Arriving eventually at the foot of a thickly wooded hill, we rode apprehensively to the edge of the deep precipice and stared in awe. At this point, the prehistoric gorge was spanned defiantly by a picturesque but unnerving little suspension bridge. Constructed of gigantic, rough-sawn timbers and suspended by equally impressive cables, the primitive little conduit proceeded courageously out into thin air, and then extended precariously at a dizzying height over a tumultuous rush of rampaging fury. The river was running high, with a frigid runoff from the mountain's generous and rapidly melting snowpack, and the reverberations of its unbridled onslaught resulted in a primal roar that literally shook the bridge. The midpoint of this remarkable swinging bridge afforded a spectacular vista of the riverbed some 30 feet below. Beneath us, the gut-wrenching force of the rampaging river boiled and bounded through a series of violently rolling rapids and unique cylindrical formations which long eons of gradual erosion had carved into the solid granite base. The road, supported by an outcropping of granite whose overhang provided home to a community of tiny bats, swung immediately to the left at the opposite side of the gorge. Below us, the restless current intermittently exhibited a fleeting streak of silver, as a rainbow trout would erupt from the surface in a frenzied attempt to surmount the foaming falls. Irrigated by the rising mists, lush growths of moss clung tenaciously to the rugged bluffs, and here and there a maidenhair fern found a hold and spread luxuriously in the canyon's filtered light. Here, in this unexpected haven, we parked the rig and spread a quilt for lunch. Stuller jays piped from the canopy of oaks, and the summer sun shone intermittently from behind a wispy sea of cumulus clouds. The mist that rose from the tumultuous rapids below periodically burst into a brilliant rainbow. The temperature warmed into the low 80s, and we sprawled on our blanket and absorbed the summer sun. Following a long, leisurely lunch, we proceeded to cross the swinging bridge and began our laborious ascent. The narrow trail ascended the cliff face in a series of narrow switchbacks, which zigzagged back and forth in a gradual climb and periodically afforded an unobstructed view, almost perpendicularly from the trail's edge, 100 feet to the boulder-buffeted torrent below. Negotiating the barely maneuverable switchbacks, we eventually approached the top of a pine-covered ridge. The distant roar of the river dissipated and grew silent, replaced by the chattering of the gregarious nuthatches and chickadees which darted in and out of the cone-clad boughs that hung in profusion from the pine and Douglas fir. Gradually, the incessant drone of the insects and the familiar but indescribable sound of the breeze in the towering evergreens lulled us into a drowsiness which left us nodding and semi-conscious in the gently rocking wagon. The mules set their own casual pace, occasionally addressing a persistent fly with a leisurely swish of their tails, and pausing briefly from time to time to browse on a tempting morsel along the way.
Poor old Grandpa fell asleep.